so because I've got a bit of a cough, and I've left it somewhere in my panic of
Well, you can go get it. We've gone live, but I mean, I'll just do a very quick intro for us. Are you sure you don't want to grab
yeah,
a no?
it'll be all right.
Okay. I mean, I've got my water here, so
Well,
it's good to have something.
it
So,
is.
yeah, I'll just do the welcomes, and just in case anyone's joining us for the first time, I thought we'll very quickly talk about who we are, what our channels are, and the easy stuff. So I'll come to you first, Roz.
Hi. So yes, I'm Roz, scally handling about the books. My channel name was meant to express the fact that I like to read, from a wide authors from a wide range of places. Put it that way, around the world, as well as from my own country. So
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah, and similar, but I started off far more eclectic, I think, 4 years ago, because I was covering world literature as well as a lot of very well-known fantasy novels and all of that. But more recently, I found myself drawn to translated and world literature, and that's of all genres again. The only genre that I always said I wasn't really into so much is horror or even body horror, which is why it's interesting which book we're going to be talking about. I don't have a copy, so there we go. So, A Sunny Place for Shady People, that's got 12 short stories which have body horror or horror elements of some sort. If you if you've read the
Not
book,
all body horror, is it? Some of it is more like ghosts, and
exactly.
it's a variety. It's quite varied. Yeah.
Yep, yep. If you've read the book, do leave us a comment, or even if you haven't and you're just interested. So, before we actually go into the book, I thought I'd leave people some time to actually join in the discussion, because sometimes it takes you a moment to sort of like grab the things you need to sort of sit down and get comfortable. So before we actually do that, I thought let's talk about Reading the Globe. This is our fourth book, isn't it? Because it was our April book. And every month for the contemporary strand, we read a contemporary book. And this month for May, we've gone into Two Trees Make a Forest. And I do have that one somewhere here. There we go. And we've been really enjoying the range of different topics that we've been exploring with the contemporary. The Reading the Globe project also has a young adult middle grade part to it, as well as a classic strand. So do join in if you feel like it. You can dip in and out. You don't have to do each book every time. But I also wanted to ask Roz what other read-alongs and readathons she's doing this month that she might want to spotlight.
Yes. Well, I've just kind of come out of April when I host People April, so which I enjoy very much. But that I feel like I was going to say I feel like a weight is lifted. It's not a weight hosting People April; it's a joy. But it just sort of it's like, oh, now I can just read whatever I fancy. But May is there's two reading events that I always associate with May, and that's Misery May, which is like read. Well, not necessarily miserable books, but books about sad things or challenging things. The books that aren't kind of happy, uplit, as it were. And this year, the hosts for that, which is Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and Gem of Books, so one in Australia and one in the UK. Brilliantly for me, they've made their theme the continents of the world, and they're saying, try and read a miserable book, maybe one or from each continent, or from a continent that isn't your own, or just kind of push yourselves a little. So it kind of tallies. I like miserable books.
Yeah.
B, it's very much in my area of enthusiasm. So
I have a feeling I know which other one you're going to mention, which
right.
other readathon. So before
Oh,
we do,
yes.
I wanted to say for Misery May, I think we both recommended a book because Gemma did a video that's sort of like to inspire people's reading. And I recommended a book, oh gosh, I'm going to forget. It's by Genki Kawamura, and it deals with dementia. I think 100 Flowers, and that was really brilliant. What did you recommend?
I recommended Brickmakers by Selva Almada, so Argentinian author, and she's written these. It's kind of like a trilogy, but it's a thematic rather than a plot-based trilogy. In that they're all about masculinity in Argentina, and in different ways. But Brickmakers is an absolute stunner of a book. I really, really rated that book, and it's quite miserable.
Argentinian author as well, is that right?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So Argentinian author, like we're talking about today. Right. Yes. I'm going to very quickly pop on some comments because we've had people join. We're taking it slow with our introductions. So hi Constance and Happy Knitter. Hi both. Happy Knitter. I have you got a different name that you're on with Discord? I'm not sure. And then we've got Mehmet and hi, Reading the Globe Fiction 2025 friends. So good to have you. I think the other one that you were going to mention was probably Mental Health May, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And though that's quite kind of low key this year, but still I'm reading something for that. But I'm going to mention a third though that I don't normally kind of attach myself to in May, and that's Horror Mayhem.
I saw that. Is that criminal? No, it's not criminally, is it?
It is criminally, and a number of other people. Yeah, and that's about reading horror and horror short stories, particularly, or shorter books and short stories from the horror genre in May. And so, if you haven't yet read this one, it would be perfect for that.
Excellent. Yeah, good. So Happy Knitter. Hi, Martha. So, okay, 50% into this month's book so far. Oh, that's good. That's further than I am at the moment. And Literary Layer. Excellent.
Hi.
So, yeah, I will consider actually Horror Mayhem. I was already going to read for the other two, and I thought it was interesting. On your channel, someone said, oh, isn't it strange that they're so opposite, the Misery May and Mental Health? And I was thinking, actually, they're not mutually exclusive, because the book that I recommended for Misery May, which deals with dementia, is actually a really an important book that also sort of explores the mental health of sort of like carers and stuff. So I don't know. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They can sort of like, you can find the commonality, make them work together. But anyway, those are those readathons. This is this one. And so we'll talk about this book. Roz, what did you think?
Oh, now, this book faced an uphill battle with me. You know, it was hard on this book, okay, because I'm not a great reader of short stories. It's not that I don't enjoy a short story, but I'm not so keen on reading a whole collection of short stories, kind of like one after the other. You know, short stories are something I might dip into. If I read them one after another, I kind of want them to connect, and I'm frustrated when they don't.
Yeah.
And I don't normally read horror, so you know, this was a challenge for me, which is good. I like to be challenged, so that's the positive. But I wasn't sure that I was the most receptive reader for this book.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. And the surprising thing is that when we had our last joint live show discussing Han Kang's We Do Not Part,
Oh.
you and Angelia were really kind to me and said, don't worry, just give the collection a go. And in the end, of the three of us, I enjoyed it the most. So that for me was actually, it gave me a chuckle at the end because I finished it and everyone was going, yeah, I don't know about this collection. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I don't like the gruesome part so much, but I thought what we can do is I've sort of like picked out some bits about the author's background, and we already talked about her being Argentinian. So she is into urban Gothic and political horror. And that's an interesting thing because I saw that the most with her first story, that there was a political element to it.
Yeah.
Because I think that was probably people's favorite story, which was My Sad Dead. And I really connected with that narrator's voice. What did you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I read that first story and I thought, great, I'm going to really love this collection because it definitely that the sort of the social critique, I suppose, was there, of Argentine society, and it really, it really sort of spoke to the different. It's a very like many countries in South America, I guess. It's got kind of extremes of poverty, and it brought home the fact that they can be very close together. And that was one of the strengths of the story, that you can be cheek by jowl with an area with very different sort of demographic and economic sort of makeup. So, and I think I was a little disappointed that not so many of the stories had that kind of political content, maybe, or
perhaps not so
explicitly, perhaps.
Exactly.
Although I think, I wouldn't say that none of them did, and I think some were very interesting about sort of the politics of the female body, say. And so there was lots of nuggets of real interest amongst the stories, but the first one was probably the one that it was like that was the high, and none of the others quite matched up so much.
Yeah, and I'll definitely come back to the themes and that sort of like wealth gap and gated communities when we go into the spoiler section, because I'm really tempted at the moment. Literary layer, I agree. I had to soft DNF, but interested in hearing your thoughts. Yeah, so some of those stories just weren't for everyone. And happy knitter, so Martha says the same. And talking about Mariana Enríquez, so she grew up during and post Argentina military dictatorship. So some of her stories will also hint towards disappearance, which I think came through with a couple of the stories, and state violence. And again, violence was in there. Often writes about the marginalized, the haunted, and the overlooked in society, and blends everyday realism with surrealism or supernatural horror. So what if real grief or inequality had or could be embodied by ghosts and people being haunted by them? So that definitely comes across. And I thought the translation was very good, because at no point did I struggle with the actual language of it. I think where people struggled was that it is not explicit necessarily about what the story is trying to tell us. So the first one was, you could really connect to the narrator, but the second one was very different, wasn't it? Because it went in, and was the second one? Oh no, I'm thinking of the one that's to do with the body that's found in the water tank.
Yeah, well, the second one is the titular story.
Oh, okay, so that's the drug use.
People, and yes, and that one started really strongly for me, because it says that the girl's voice is nasal and metallic, and I really recognized that voice that she was describing, and I have to stop myself when if someone stops me in the street like asking for money, as happens, and they've got that nasal metallic voice, I kind of this wave of prejudice comes up in my, and I have to stop myself from making assumptions about that person's results. So it, she has moments of real kind of like acuity, doesn't she?
Yep.
But yes, that was that story. I think the one was the one you were thinking of, the Face of Disgrace.
I think so.
Yeah.
But A Sunny Place for Shady People. I think I said this in the Discord that I was surprised that would be the titled story, but maybe it's just because the title is so good.
Oh, it's just brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant.
The title is so good, but it wasn't anyone in Discord's favorite story. So very often you do have a majority of people going, yeah, that's my favorite story, and then that's the title. But yeah.
But I mean, I think I don't want to sound overly sort of negative about the book. There were again and again there were moments that absolutely kind of, as you say, really good translation. But I presume that was reflecting this really sharp style that she has. I loved often I thought the story started really well. Face of Disgrace, it starts by saying her hands made the sound of crabs. I thought, what a brilliant first line,
Well, so I think Literary Leia would agree with you that the start is okay and probably the end not so much. I didn't understand the end of the second one. So I think we'll go into that with the spoiler section that we'll go into soon. Then we'll warn everyone that we're going to go into the details of each story. And hopefully we'll have an answer for you, because some of them were really open-ended or... and not all of them hugely memorable. I've had a quick skim read through. I think I remember 8 of them more than 4 of them. So we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look.
Literally Leia's just sort of popped in a spoiler, but because it's a short story collection, like I don't think you can have spoilers, but it's different because you're only spoiling potentially one story,
exactly.
and then someone's got to remember that was referring to that story. So it's less of a problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. Like I say, we're gonna go. All we're doing is speculating at the moment. You haven't done a spoiler. It's a case of us looking at it later. So in terms of stylistic choices, I think we've already sort of like touched on that in terms of saying that she's got these moments of brilliance, and it comes across in terms of how she describes people. For me, Emma was the number one sort of person that she described so well that I actually really connected with that narrator, because she was so I suppose empathic, sympathetic, that sort of thing. She seemed to really be a people person. You get that sense. And obviously in the neighborhood, she also seemed to be the most conscientious. And maybe that is also the one with the most conscience and therefore has these feelings. So I'll have a quick look at my notes to make sure. First close third person points of view. So the style choices seemed to blur reality, and it was almost like sometimes it was like hallucination. I especially got that with the woman who said she's the youngest sister in a family, and sometimes the others don't remember her except for the painter. So that was had a hallucinogenic tone to it throughout the story. A lot of them do. And they seem to start grounded, which maybe that's why people don't mind the start. And then they seem to unravel more towards the end. So I kind of felt that, like the start feels a little bit more solid, and then it all starts.
And a really good example of that is the refrigerator graveyard. No, it's I've forgotten
the cemetery.
It's a cemetery. Because that I mean, that's one of the stories where I feel like the image that I have is absolutely sort of, it remains very vivid to me. The idea of that, all those fridges, and as if they were gravestones, sort of thing. But also, that it was very concrete. The idea of children, play, it's a sort of risky, silly thing that children do, isn't it? And then, but then, as you say, then the story sort of changes into something less, sort of rooted in reality. And that's sort of kind of typical example, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking is, were they all female protagonists? Certainly felt that way. They all seem to be female first characters, or almost all.
Almost all. Not.
There was two men, I think, aside from Hyena Hymns, which followed the two young men, unless maybe there was one or another as well, but majority of the 12, I think, were women. Yeah. And I'll come to Hyena Hymns and why that sort of like also put me in mind of the three ladies with changing clothes. But I'll come back to that when we're going into spoilers. Let's see. So, wide themes and motifs that we see across all of the stories. I was thinking there's ghosts and hauntings, because you pointed that out at the start, that, when I said, I wasn't sure about body horror, but instead I actually ended up really enjoying this collection more than other people. And you mentioned, well, it's also ghosts and hauntings, and how that links in with guilt, complicity, and conscience. Yes, we have the body horror, and very often that seems to mirror women's relationships to their bodies, especially in Metamorphosis. Then we've got social inequality and urban decay. So the buildings in a lot of cases are sort of like decaying. And that seems to be this urban decay that's described. And also the social inequality, we get the gated communities and the sort of like, there's a different word for it, not the slums, but, sort of close. Cursed objects and haunted clothes, or cursed clothes, who knows. And then there's truths buried in silence. So, for example, like the refrigerator cemetery. So those are the key things that I sort of like pulled out. But that means we'll soon get to the spoiler area. So let's have a look at comments.
Well, I was just looking at Mehmet's comment about, because he's picking up on the way some of those themes that that you've mentioned actually imply that subtle political background, as he said, and it I mean, I felt a lot of that in a way. The message that I kept picking up was, our society is riddled with something, but what is it? And you express that through a supernatural thing rather than say, what it is. But it's really interesting, as Mehmet points out, that also making the point that lots of Argentinians choose to migrate, but actually the USA, say, where most of them, would go, is equally kind of riddled with inequality and some of the similar sort of threats, perhaps, although dressed up more as sort of not military dictatorship or whatever, but it's not simple, is it?
Yeah, and like you say, a lot of the history that we're looking at when we look at South American countries, they mirror each other. So I recently read a Brazilian book which mirrored our first book, which was set in Chile, which is about clean and domestic workers. And then talking about this and Argentinians migrating to the USA, I was then thinking, well, again, going back to, the books that we've been reading, we started off with Chile, and we're close to ending this read-along or readathon with Isabel Allende, who is a Chilean writer who settled in America. So she's Chilean American. So I think a lot of the countries surrounding there have that similar experience. Happy Knitter, almost always female points of view. Yeah. Okay. In her other books as well, she's a feminist writer, to me, challenging the culture. Yeah. And Constance, I can't quite understand what a metallic voice sounds like. Ooh, I think she's tempting you into an inspiration. It's not going to happen. We'll be
kind of whiny nasal.
Nice try, Constance.
I'm not going to try and do it. You know it when you hear it.
Okay, so we can go into stories. I think we started off by talking about the first one. It seemed to be, most people's favorite in the Discord, and that is My Sad Dead. So so we're now in the spoiler section. So if people want to, have a quick chat about My Sad Dead, that's what we're going to do now. For me, this was, like I said, my favorite because I love the narration and I could see what she was doing with the ghosts. What about you, Roz?
And it's interesting because looking back at it in the book, I realized that it was like less than 30 pages, but maybe 25. It's more expansive in my memory than that, and I think that's a really good sign with a short story. If you feel like you've got a place or a set of people, or in your head as a result of reading it, then it's done its job. So
yeah, absolutely. And it was really well populated with both the living and the dead, because on the one hand, you've got her dealing with very much alive people, including the ex-husband who wants to tempt her to come live close to him to help him with the new wife, which I thought was a little funny.
Oh, but I think that really speaks to the sense of entitlement of Argentine men. And I was mentioning earlier about reading Selva Almada, and that sort of comes out in her books, I think.
Yeah, so almost ascribing his ex-wife a maternal, figure. Come help me, But the hauntings that she had, it starts off with the mother, but then of course we realize that she sees so many more ghosts than that. And for me, the question was around, well, it gave me a hint straight away when she talked about what she could hear was the mum's sort of like scream of pain. But the biggest thing for me was the reaction of the ghost as well, which, is not always in pain or angry, sometimes laughing, like in a great mood. And that spoke to me because I was like, I think this is remembrance. Like she is sort of like haunted by the remembrance of the many different things that her mother went through and her life, like her time caring for her mum. And then you sort of see that with all of the other ghosts as well and her connection to that. So what did you think?
I quite liked the way there was something quite matter of fact about her description of the ghost. I think because, like the character, it's Emma, isn't it? That's her name. Yeah.
Yes.
She seems such a sort of rational, sensible, caring person. There's nothing sort of woo-woo about her, and nor about the way she talks about the ghost. So that made it easier for me to kind of identify with the story or engage with the story, I suppose. It wasn't. I realized that the kind of horror that perhaps I dislike. No, not dislike, but don't respond well, is horror that I think is trying to kind of scare me, wants to do the proverbial, something jumping out from behind a bush, psychologically to me. And she very much that isn't what she's doing. That's not the kind of horror that she's writing. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I might have sort of like mixed them up, but I thought A Sunny Place for Shady People was the one that was based on the real life person's death at the Cecil Hotel. So I think I've got the titles mixed up.
No, it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that is the one with the water tank. Okay. So
with
Alyssa.
Elise is sent to cover the story, and
Yes. Yeah. So we've got the journalist and Alyssa Lamb's death at the Cecil Hotel. I read up the actual story, and that's really sad, considering that she had sort of mental health issues, and she was had schizophrenia. Yeah. So I wasn't sure how to process that one. It felt a little bit strange, especially after I knew that it was sort of like inspired by a real story.
Yes. I didn't know whether to be slightly whether I found that slightly distasteful.
Do you think she did it on purpose, almost like because the people in that story, like there's almost this cult-like group that goes and they touch the water tank, and is she critiquing the wider popularity of true crime and people's fascination with true crime? Because I think most of us were uncomfortable once we realized that's a real person, but I think she did it on purpose.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought that through, but yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't make me like it anymore, but I think she did.
Yeah, but that's it's
sort
an
of like
honest
challenging us.
intention. Yeah. Yes, that's fair. Yeah. Yes, but then it slightly kind of went to pieces for me a bit as a story. Well, yeah. I think Martha said she didn't understand the end of the second one. No, me neither. But and I don't need to understand things in things I read. I don't mind being left confused. But it felt it became slightly disjointed. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Daisy. Good to see you.
So the next one is Face of Disgrace, or maybe that's not the third in line, but it's the third banner that I did.
Yes, it is. I've got the book here. Yeah, Face of Disgrace.
Lucky.
The one with that magic first line about her hands made the sound of crabs, and it's because of her shiny nails. She's got nail varnish on that's kind of they're all hard and moving them over the table, and
for me,
I really like that opening.
That was the most disturbing one for me. Because I started so since we're in the spoiler section, I was concerned about these people's ability to breathe, and like she sort of like brought that to it was just really disturbing because it was helping she was moving it along so slowly that you sort of experienced it with this young woman, and I found that really that was the hardest one for me.
It's quite it's quite immersive, I suppose, because it builds slowly. And I mean, I suppose anyone who's known someone with who's really damaged by their alcohol use, that rang very true. I suppose that her mother like crawling because she can't walk, and it's like that's almost more disturbing than the horror, the supernatural elements in the story, isn't it? Which
and
maybe is the point.
I suppose the son or her brother,
Diego.
So he sort of wanted her to live this full life before it happens to her, and then he also tried to put it out of his mind. So she wasn't haunted in the same way the mother was, where the mum turned to drink. But equally, was that a fair thing to do? Because I'm thinking, is the daughter going to be affected? Because I couldn't tell whether the daughter had been adopted, and is this thing a biologically passed on thing, or is it purely because would it matter that she's adopted or not adopted? I don't know.
Yes. Is it like kind of Huntington's career or something? As in like a sort of genetic disorder, as it were,
Yeah.
and you know, or is it about something about their connections with each other that they pass it on? Is it infectious, as it were?
Yeah.
Or
So I read through a few newspaper articles and a blog. I'll let everyone know what they were at the end. But what I got out of that, because for me it was just like such a disturbing story that instead of like just sitting down and writing what I thought it was, I was like, I wonder what other people think, because I'm so affected by how immersive it was. I'm not seeing what the metaphors are. So I had a look, and the metaphors that I could find that people have come up with was generational trauma, shame, and erasure of identity. Which, erasure of identity, I could see. Part of me was even thinking of like, you know, like perhaps a degenerative disease, you know, like a degenerative ailment. But then I just thought to myself, that makes sense if it's a metaphor for generational trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's true, actually. Yeah. I think I was probably, perhaps because of my background, where I was sort of going off on the inherited conditions sort of line, but yeah, intergenerational trauma. Good point.
And apparently there is a myth or an urban legend in Argentina of the faceless man. I suppose there is in a lot of places,
Yes.
the faceless man. Certainly people tend to have nightmares about faceless people. So Mehmet said, after those first two stories, I just thought, leave the dead alone. Yeah, yeah. Why are they always trapped?
Yeah.
True.
That's a really good point. And I suppose, you know, yes, I would like to feel that I suppose what is horrifying about the idea of ghosts, and in the first two stories, is the idea that you don't get to escape the troubles of your life when you're dead. You know, you hope, if nothing else, when you're dead, you escape the troubles of your life, and that's what makes them so disturbing, I suppose.
Yeah. What's the next story? Because I don't think my
Julie.
next
Julie is the next one.
Yeah, I knew I didn't have that in the right order. Let me move that. There we go.
There. And it's the Gringa, how did you say it? Cousin. You know, she's brought from the States to Argentina.
Oh, her parents were awful.
They were superbly awful people.
They just wanted to sort of like dump on the relatives because she didn't fit in with the reputation or the image that they had cultivated in the States. I was like, oh my goodness, you know, like no care at all for her, other than if she can't bring us prestige, then we just don't want her to bring us shame. So we'll just leave her there. Yeah.
I mean, is that something about like why people, like, if you emigrate, if you migrate in order to, you know, get a better shiny life, well, there's often an issue of people pretending to have then, you know, having to pretend their life in the new country is better than it is to the people back home, because otherwise, you know, you look stupid, you know, that you've made that leap. But also the sort of hoping to remake yourself, and then not wanting things that don't fit that. So hence,
yeah. Well, the interesting thing for me was they're living the sort of like the high life over there, but the narrator's dad had their number. He knew. He's like, okay, so you're leaving her at the hospital here. Have you paid for? And they're like, of course, you know, what do you think? And they call the administrator and he's like, no, we've had no money. So that really, you know, that was fascinating. I think it was a really tricky one because it was so odd, but equally it was fascinating in the family dynamics for me. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what to think of that ending. I mean, like, did the cousin leave her in the best place ever, or are they like, you know, like, are they harmful people? I don't know.
Yeah, it seemed extraordinarily rash, but
yeah.
Yeah.
And so if we said that ghosts throughout the book are not real, what could this story be a metaphor for? Because she is having these intimate relationships with ghosts. So what would the ghosts be? The only thing I can think of is in terms of the human body, maybe unmet desire. And there was something to do with body confidence or something like that, because she didn't necessarily want to be physically attractive to other people. And she said the ghosts find her attractive no matter what. And she's always eating. She eats compulsively, doesn't she?
Yes. Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing for me. I was like, I think she's trying to say something about women and bodies and desire, but I'm not sure what.
Yeah. So I suppose we go back to what Martha said about, you know, that it's best to kind of understand her as a feminist author, and that you know, obviously Martha's read more of her books than you or I. So that then probably if you're thinking it might be something about body confidence and women's bodies, then probably is, isn't it?
Something like that, but I still don't necessarily understand it.
Yeah.
And what is the story after that? If I was thinking, is it different colors made of tears?
Oh, let me
or is it the suffering?
Nightbirds. Nightbirds is next.
Wasn't it? Yes, there we go. Okay, there we go. So if anyone's got thoughts on Nightbirds.
I again it was another one that had a really strong start, because I mean, I don't know if you remember, but it's on the shores of this river, all the birds that fly, drink, perch on branches, and disturb siestas with the demonic squawking of the possessed, all those birds were once women.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of that instantly sucked me in, you know.
But it then changed towards being more in that house and with the art and all of that, isn't it?
Yes. So and as I say, sometimes the rest of the story didn't match up for me for the success of the first sort of paragraph or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I found that one memorable because of the grandmother and the cat.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I love a cat in a book, you know.
Well, it didn't last very long with the grandmother. So it was certainly memorable, but not particularly cozy.
Far from cozy. They're the opposite of you know, Japanese cozy cat stories or whatever.
I also found it really strange in terms of the one sister seems to have this well, she's got this ability, she's doing the artwork and everything, but she teases the younger sister that, oh, you're just a figment of my imagination sort of thing.
And then and you know, and there is a classic, most families with siblings have a story about the older sibling at some point saying to the younger sibling something like, oh, the police brought you, or you know, a man came through the window and left you with us and we had to keep you. You know, that's a kind of typical sibling, older sibling sort of way of, you know, distressing their younger sibling.
But I struggled to figure out the bit about the mother, like the reason she would have taken her own life. And then after that, the others don't pay the youngest one attention except the sister. So she does kind of feel that she is a figment of, or she might not exist, and that she is rotting away.
And maybe she doesn't. You know, maybe she never did. Maybe, or you know, or was she you know, was she a baby that miscarried, or
true, could be,
or you know, a neonatal death, or that, you know, I was left with a lot of odd questions with that one. But I liked the I like the stories about the birds and the bird women and the potu. I had to look up what a potu was and what it looked like, you know, and so on. And the the story of the Guarani princess, and those elements, a little bit of sort of folklore in that story, sustained me somewhat. Yeah,
that makes sense.
But yeah, and thinking about the women's bodies and eating and so on. Yeah, Millie's locked up because she stops eating.
Okay.
In that story. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yes, they've got different ways of coping with things, and she claims that it's not because she doesn't want to eat, but because she becomes so engrossed in what she's doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something like when she does her artwork and everything, she just doesn't think to eat. Yeah.
Yes. She says she didn't stop eating to kill herself. She did it because she was so focused.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if that were something that could happen, especially in what seems to be an environment that is very dysfunctional with the whole family. So if she wants to tune out the rest of the world and sort of like immerse herself in her own imaginary world. So what have we got next in terms of the stories?
Oh, hold on. I can tell you. Oh. I've lost my place. Let me find it. I was just going to say, in that one we had William Morris wallpaper at one point.
Oh yeah.
That's really kind of jolted me to kind
like
of
the strawberry thief and all of that nice stuff. Probably loads of birds everywhere.
Yeah. So the next story is Metamorphosis.
Okay. And quite a few people like this one.
Yes, although this was the most kind of body horror-ish one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I so it was a little bit too close to home for me, because I was like, oh, because I obviously have endometriosis and all these very different women-centered issues around reproduction, and I was like, I don't want to read this story. And I certainly would not feel very connected to a cyst or a fibroid.
No.
So what do you think this was a metaphor?
But then, I'm mystified by women that eat their placenta after giving birth. I mean, I can,
yeah,
people do.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know
there is at least in theory some sort of logic to that about getting back
all your iron. All your
but,
iron, because you've lost a lot of blood during
exactly, and animals do it, so I know. But so getting your cyst sort of inserted.
No. But yeah, I found that one really odd, and I like how matter of fact the surgeon is. She's like, oh no, I couldn't do that, but I know someone. Really?
But then again, thinking about the political thing, there's something about that idea that somebody will be prepared to do anything that you are prepared to pay for. Reciprocation, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's see. My notes on that. Medical trauma, female rage, and bodily autonomy. So I was trying to think that maybe this is a way that she reclaims some autonomy, but what a way. I mean, seriously, would you want? Anyway, there we go. And
there we go. So that it wasn't. I know a lot of people like that story. Well, didn't do it for me. That one. The next one was Hyena Hymns.
Yeah, and that one I found, and that is with the young men. So that was a difference in terms. That one really stood out to me as being different.
Yeah.
So let's see. What did you think?
Well, I it was one where I read the title and that I was intrigued. I was interested by hyenas. And if you ever seen the film of there's some communities I think it's in Ethiopia where like hyenas come into the town at night and are sort of not domesticated, but people have a very close connection with the hyenas, and so I was instantly kind of like something about that appealed to me. But
Okay.
actually, yeah, the that wasn't what I got from the story. Maybe it was. But what was interesting was about like people. It talked again about the migrant experience, or and then coming back. And so the thing about people who've left talking down Argentina, and then there's some line about the moment they hear it's a particular type of music or something, then they just want to be back, so that the sort of duality, I suppose, of leaving your country and despite sort of looking down at it, but actually still love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I liked certain descriptions in that, but I found it really odd when they're having the conversation about female hyenas, sort of like having the sort of that the sexual organs mimic the
Yes.
males, and
Yeah.
they're so dominant and everything. And I knew that from like wildlife channels,
Yes.
but they were so into it. I was like, okay, well, great.
But again, I guess if you're thinking about it in terms of sort of feminist perspective and masculinity, and so,
Exactly.
it's like men worrying about other people's penises or whatever,
Yeah.
and then if it's like a woman that a female animal that's got this thing, it's like, oh yeah, that discomfort that they felt, as it were, kind of. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know, but it was again an odd little story. And oh no, not hyenas again was the kind of
Yep.
yeah.
So the next one, let's have a quick
Well,
look.
different
Before
colors
I go
made
on.
of tears.
Okay. And
Yeah.
before I
Oh,
do that, Constance had said, I promise I had no expectation that Roz would perform for me.
no.
So
I knew that, Constance. I wasn't worried. It was still in Catch's head.
I know, I'm teasing.
Mm.
Okay, so different colors made of tears. There we go. I'm trying to remember what that one was. I'm sure I've done some notes for it. Do you remember it clearly?
It's
Different.
the no. That has
Oh
to be
yeah,
like
of course.
red.
It's the title that put me off. It's the vintage clothing shop.
Oh yes, yes,
I
that's
do
it.
remember that one very well because it was
Oh,
the whole idea that your clothes could attack you like that. I was like, "Oh my gosh." They were
uh,
all excited about picking up some vintage clothing. I mean, it
yes, and the jewelry. Yeah.
makes you think, doesn't it? A lot of the times there's different places that say old things, when they're so well looked after and stuff, they have a soul. And this is almost like the opposite. I mean, this is vintage stuff that has a curse. And I was like, well, I'd rather not have that one, thank you very much. I'd rather have the well cared for, loved stuff that like carries good positive vibes, instead of what these were. So I thought that was a very impactful one.
But quite yeah, I mean, genuinely quite horrific though, and quite, yeah, well, remember it says yeah, very graphic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that sort of was another one that took us down memory again, memory
Mm,
and trauma, because without
yeah.
necessarily knowing it, by putting
Mm,
on these clothes, these women experience this assault or this
yeah.
violence on them, which
Yeah.
is the memory and trauma of someone else. But
Yeah.
equally, after that, when they get the call from that person who sold them the clothes, which they thought was a great bargain, he was
Mhm.
extremely threatening, wasn't he?
Yeah.
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 So
But also, is it her like there was her grandmother that she was remembering being like that, very critical, calling them hussies, and that
yeah,
that's so
yes.
that women also buying into
Yeah,
that.
internalized
Yeah,
misogyny
yeah,
with the grandmother, sort of like
that's the words I
constantly
was
putting
looking
them
for.
down.
Yes,
Yeah,
internalized misogyny.
constantly. It is a fascinating idea, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
So I think she did that one effectively. It's just a
yeah.
shame that I don't equate the story with that title, Different
No,
Colors Made of Tears, because I went totally blank. And
me
then a
too.
moment I looked at my notes and it said vintage clothing shop. I was like, oh my gosh,
Oh,
I like
that
that
one.
story. I thought it was really impactful. It's like the symbolism is much clearer than a lot of the stories.
Yeah.
It's creepy, it's visceral. Like
Yeah.
Mehmet said, it's so graphic that you experience that. And I thought it was interesting that it's almost like when someone has been gaslit and they're looking for validation of the way they're interpreting things because they didn't mean to harm the client. They were just curious, is this about us? And it's almost like, is it our fault that the clothes are attacking us? And then they're sort of like waiting with bated breath, but this poor customer, so I thought that was an interesting one.
But and also that because they're so lovely and so stylish, the temptation, there was that sort of, yeah. So we want to be beautiful, and at what cost? Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh. Yeah. The next one is The Suffering Woman.
The Suffering Woman. Oh,
yeah.
Where is it?
And with Paola, and she was getting like she got audio messages that weren't for her.
Yes.
That one.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of up-to-date version of horror, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. But I weirdly, though, I kind of found that a slightly inconsequential story.
Yeah, it was different. And the only thing I can think is it's kind of like her being forced to witness the suffering of someone, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose.
But I would agree with that. It was sort of anticlimactic because of the strong start.
Yes.
So I was thinking time travel. I don't know if you did that, but I thought to myself, what if someone, a friend in the future, is phoning her, and these are messages about her future suffering and that sort of thing. So that did surprise me, but I kind of I felt the same way.
You'd have written a better version of the story then.
Just with my imagination, clearly not with my actual ability to write, because I mean, she's written these so well. So is a local artist next?
I'll tell you. No, it's the Refrigerator Cemetery.
Refrigerator Cemetery. Okay.
I know not everyone in the Discord group liked this story, but I thought it was one of the most memorable.
Yeah.
It's one that's going to stick in my mind, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah, and probably, like you say, it's one of those that you remember from similar news articles, like kids did this and then the result was tragic and this happened, or and the kids in this story don't seem to mean to, like they haven't set out to do something, I don't think.
We're not, or have they? We're not quite sure. There's a little bit of ambiguity about that, but the point is they were young enough that you wouldn't necessarily, like below the age of criminal responsibility, I suppose, that you wouldn't perhaps fully understand the implications of what you were doing, even if it was kind of deliberate. Yeah.
So was the there were other bodies, weren't there?
Oh yeah,
the kids,
and people used it to like just get rid of pets in the economic crisis. To people that didn't have, and then there were homeless people living in the Refrigerator Cemetery. There was, it was like a sort of repository for all the things going wrong in Argentina at the time somehow. Yeah.
So when you say Refrigerator Cemetery, you kind of just think a dumping place for these items, but really it does become a cemetery in reality.
So, and a dumping place for pets and people, and and it's a very sort of sort of failure of Argentina's sort of capitalist dream sort of image, isn't it? I suppose.
And so I suppose it could be a case of the children's actions or their unthinkingness being very close to the state's the state, but the state was actually very often not unthinking, but malicious in terms of disappearances. Yeah. So what have we got next?
Yeah. And I'm conscious of the time. Actually, the next one is a local artist.
Local artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're coming up to an hour. A local artist. Yep, a city couple.
Yeah, and yes, it was all right. Again, it wasn't that wasn't as memorable a story for me, I suppose.
No, and it was just mostly about urban decay, I think. So no.
But the thing that got me really, that I did take from it, which I was really fascinated by, was the Defunta Correa and Gauchito Gil. So these kind of saints that are unofficial saints in Argentina. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of reading up about those, and the one that she dies, but her baby survives because her dead body miraculously keeps producing milk for the baby till the baby, and that's she's still a very popular figure,
Wow.
So yeah,
I'll have to. I didn't look that one up, but I should do, because it does.
So that was the most memorable thing about that story for me, and delightfully, I just read the my first Misery May book. There's another Selva Almada from Argentina, The Wind That Lays Waste, and it came up in that, and it was like, I know about that now, because I
know that. Yeah. That is the advantage of sort of like reading about certain countries. I find that now with Japanese and Korean fiction, that if there's historical bits, I'm like, I remember that from this one. So is the last one Black Eyes?
Black Eyes is the last
and
one.
That's the final one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the final one. With the picture at the end. Sorry, I'm getting the wrong angle. It's because it's back to front on this.
On the count,
go counter the way I think. Yeah.
So that one was pretty scary. I thought, like, imagine you stop to talk to these kids and then they're just so creepy, and they've got these sort of like soulless eyes, and when you drive off they're running on all fours. I thought, ooh, this one is quite easy to imagine for some reason, and also
and more and this one in a way was more like horror films.
Yes. I think that's why it was quite easy to visualize.
So it had a cinematic
quality. Seemed to follow that format.
Yes. More so. So I mean, going back through it with you now, I think there was a lot of variety in the stories, and I probably should have like spread them over the month, like read one and then left gap and then read another, rather than reading one after the other was less, perhaps. I became a bit inured to the impact.
Yep, that makes sense. I made sure that I had finished reading because I tend to read like 4 books at the same time, sort of like dip in and out. But then when I pick up short story collections, I tend to just focus on the short stories, because they do take quite a bit out of you when you're processing things, because you do have that lack of a theme running through. If you're reading a novel, or you're reading a sort of like nonfiction travelogue like our next book, it is all one thing, like you're continuing, and it feels less strenuous. Whereas with the short stories, like you say, sometimes there's a common thread, but it's not so exact, and then you have to do more I don't know, thinking around it.
Yes, because each time you've got to think, what was that ending? What happened? What do I think about that?
What are the character dynamics? All of that.
And she doesn't do neat endings. Well, there we go.
Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. I think there's one comment that I might have missed, because I can see there we go. Thank you. Great discussion. I'm going to try to finish it in May and spread it out. Okay. Don't feel obligated, but if you feel, inspired, then that's great.
And
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mehmet. And I'm already really enjoying the next book, so I'm looking forward to the discussion for that.
Yep, me too. And that's on your channel.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.